Hey guys, so I recorded a video very similar to the one I'm recording right now sometime last week, and for whatever reason, I was asked to take it down, and so I'm re-recording it. Just to give you my very blunt opinion, I think there's definitely some spiritual warfare stuff going on. If you're not a Christian, not exactly sure what that means, I think there are some spirits at work, good and evil, doing some fighting and some battling for the hearts and minds of people, and they just happen to be playing out in my circle as well. And so, because I think that the message, what I'm about to talk to you guys about, is so very important for some of you in particular, here's what I'm asking you to do. Because it was asked to get taken down last time, I'm going to ask that you share the snot out of it. So I'm actually going to be talking directly to young people. Over the course of my life and currently, I've had the opportunity to have relationships with literally thousands of young people, teenagers, children. And so a lot of you guys still have connections here. I've recently removed a lot of you from social media just for some protection of accusations and that kind of stuff. But I know I have a lot of parents on my social media platforms, and so I'm going to ask you, share this with your kids, get them to share it on their social media platforms, have them share it through email, share the link. It started spreading fairly quickly last week, but let's get this out there even more, because the message, what I want to talk to you guys about real quick here, is a little bit about my life and my upbringing and what I've learned from this. But it's not surprising what I'm about to say. Well, to some of you guys, it may be surprising. You ready? Here it goes. Sometimes life sucks. Some of you guys know this all too well. Some of you guys have been experiencing this level of hurt or brokenness or frustration or anger or depression or whatever for a long time. And it seems like for you, when things are about to get better, then they turn and they seem to get worse again. Some of you guys know what a hard life is. Some of you guys have had seasons of life where things are going really well and then they crash all of a sudden. And you might be in that season now, or you might have gone through it and you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and waiting for things to get bad again, but you're enjoying this season of life right now. And for some of you guys, life has been pretty good. You haven't had to deal with a whole lot of struggles or heartache or frustrating situations or circumstances, and for that, I am so glad for you. But I do want to warn you, there are seasons in everybody's life where challenges come. And to those of you who are facing those struggles or have faced those struggles or will face those struggles, I want to let you know that I personally know exactly what you're going through. I know how you're feeling. I know what's going on in your head. And I can say that because I have been there, and to a degree, I am there now. Not to a big degree, but my family almost seems to have lived there for a while. My dad, in particular, whenever he was a child, his mom remarried another man who ended up becoming his stepdad, who was a violent drunk. I mean, he was drinking all the time. Whenever he wasn't drinking at work, he was very charismatic. He was a very personable man, so lots of people liked him. But whenever he got drunk, he turned into a different animal, literally an animal. My dad was abused, beaten till he bled. So was his siblings, but not just physically. My dad was verbally abused, all the time told that he was a piece of trash. He'd never amount to anything. And then he was abused in other ways as well. His stepdad would make him and his siblings have certain relationships with one another. Sometimes at gunpoint, he would force them to do things with him and with their mom. And my dad was just a broken child because at the hands of his stepdad. He, of course, hated it. Resisted it at times, of course, would get beat even more. But his stepdad realized that if he gave the kids drugs and alcohol, my dad alcohol, and those sort of things, before he performed some of those types of abuses, that the kids were less combative. They didn't fight back as much. They were more numb to it. And so before my dad was even out of middle school. He says that everybody knew that he was just a drunk because he was always trying to numb the pain, always trying to numb the hurt. And so that's just who he was. My mom and dad met when they were children. Their parents would party together over these weekend-long binges, and all the kids were locked into bedrooms during that time. And so my mom and dad met when they were very young and had similar life experiences. And so when my dad got old enough, he ran away. He dropped out of school and joined the military. My mom was still in high school at the time, a couple years younger. But when she got old enough, she ran away as well. And they ended up getting married. She was 18 and he was 20 years old, I believe. Two young people, both running from life's problems. But my dad took with him the habits and addictions into adulthood. Whenever things got tough, he would continue to drink. He would continue to do pot. He would continue to do other things just to numb all the challenges of life around. And he was always afraid that he might turn into his stepdad. And so my mom and dad started having children, me and eventually 3 other younger siblings, when my dad would go on these binges, he was afraid of getting violent with us or anything. And so he would just leave the kids for days or weeks on end until he straightened up a little bit, got sober a little bit, and then he would come home. Whenever I was 4 years old, my dad got angry at the company that he was working for, Domino's Pizza at the time. He thought that he deserved a promotion, and they ended up giving it to somebody else. And so on his binge during this time of anger and frustration and not just caring about life was really, really difficult for him at the time as well. So he decided to take it out on the company. And he was going to do whatever it took. He had a dream years ago that he was going to die at the age of 25. He was almost 25 at the time, so he just didn't care. And so my dad went to a Domino's Pizza, walked into the store, and executed the 2 employees on duty that day. He ended up shooting one of them in the head, but they didn't die instantly. And they managed to drive themselves to a police station right up the road and identify Mitchell Sims as the shooter before he died. And so, as you can imagine, my dad's picture and face was on all the local TV stations and the newspaper. So my dad and his girlfriend at the time fled, and they went to California. Still mad at the company, still didn't care about his own life. He used to put his cigarettes out on his arm. He called himself the human ashtray. He just did not care about his life because it sucked so much. But he fled to California and decided that they were going to continue their spree of robbing Domino's pizzas and killing the employees. And so he ordered a pizza. When the delivery driver brought it to the hotel room, they executed him, took his shirt, walked into that Domino's pizza, and hung 2 other people in the freezer. Those people were found and rescued before they ended up dying, but they were able to recognize, because of the receipt on the hotel, that it was Mitchell Sims. And now from coast to coast, my dad was known as the Domino's Killer. He and his girlfriend fled to Las Vegas, went to a bar and a hotel, was hitchhiking back. Somebody picked him up before he went to a bar on Christmas Eve and saw my dad's picture on the TV and saw there was a reward. And so he turned my dad in, told the police where they had dropped him off. And so Christmas Eve, 1985, my dad was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and left my mom to raise 4 kids on her own. Life was tough. Again, my mom had dropped out of high school to run away from home to marry my dad, and now she was a single parent with 4 young kids. And so we were poor. I mean, there's a joke that says we were so po, we couldn't even afford the other OR. We weren't poor, we were po. We were struggling a lot. There were times in our household where we did not have food or groceries. And boxes of food just happened to be randomly dropped on our steps, or we couldn't afford to pay our bills. My mom told us as kids, whenever somebody would knock on the door, to be really, really quiet, to run to one of the bedrooms or one of the closets in case anybody started peeking in the windows, because we couldn't afford rent and the landlord would come knocking on the door. They would come asking for their money, but we didn't have it, so we had to be quiet now that we weren't there. There were times where I remember having to carry a 5-gallon bucket from our neighbors next door to put water in, so we bring back to flush the toilets or wash clothes in the bathtub or do whatever. We struggled a lot growing up. But my mom remember during the summers when she was growing up, her parents would send her to a grandparent's house, and her grandparents, every Sunday, they would go to church. They had a really stable life. They were really religious, Christian type people, and my mom thought, those people have the best life of anybody that I know, and so I'm going to try to be like them to my kids. And so when we were young, she started taking us to church. And people at the church would step up and they would start helping our family, and they started loving on us. And I had men in the church that would start investing in my life. That didn't make things better, but it helped us get through. And again, as things continued, I went into middle school. I'd never played football or anything, but the middle school coach saw me in 6th grade and said, "Hey, you ought to come out for football next year. You're a big guy. You look like you can play." So I went out for 7th grade and played football for the very first time. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, but over time realized that, hey, I might be a little good at this game. Played in high school and started getting some letters from some college coaches. There were coaches, some of you guys may recognize the name Nick Saban. He was coaching at Michigan State at the time. He was handwriting me letters, inviting me to come and check out their campus. And a guy by the name of Philip Fulmer at Tennessee was handwriting me letters, asking me to come check out their campus and come visit with them. And but I was a homebody. I like being close to home, and so it was really cool when a coach by the name of Lou Holtz was handwriting me letters, asking me to come check out the University of South Carolina. And so, long story short, I ended up finishing high school and going to USC to play football for Coach Lou Holtz, and things just weren't right. Things just didn't feel natural. I was really good at it. I was working my way up the depth chart within the first couple of weeks. Being a backup to an All-American offensive lineman, but just things, it's just not where I was supposed to be, and I couldn't figure out why. I finally had this opportunity to better myself, to get an education. It was going to be free, not cost me anything. But I just knew I had to quit. And so I had people telling me how disappointed in me they were. I had people telling me that I was making this huge mistake, but I just had to quit football. I quit after that year at USC and just knew that I wanted a Christian education. I wanted to go somewhere that would teach me to love God more. And so I went to a university called Columbia International University. Didn't know what I was going to do. I was a political science major at USC and thought about possibly getting into politics, but they didn't have that major there. So I ended up becoming an early education major before switching it again. But during my first year there at CIU, they had some churches there on campus where their pastors would come and just tell the students about their churches and how they can serve and how they can be served. And I met a pastor there, talked with him 30, 45 minutes, and he ended up telling me at the end of that conversation, and I'm 19 years old at the time, "Hey, we're looking for a children's director. I think you ought to put in an application for it." And so I did, and I just thought that I would get this job maybe to finish my way through college and then become a teacher or get into law enforcement or something before I took that next step up into politics. And God used that opportunity where I was hired at 19 years old and ended up staying there for 11 years at that one particular church. And I started having conversations with students. Started out with children, then was promoted full-time to the student ministry director, then became a pastor. And I started building relationships with people. And as that trust grew in people, I began to have students come to me and tell me about some of the hurts and challenges in their lives, some of the depression, some of the struggles in their home. Had a young man tell me before church or after church one day that before he came to church, his dad had slammed him up against the wall and punched him. So getting reports of domestic violence and abuse and alcoholism and drug use and homelessness and all these things that students were experiencing. And they weren't telling anybody else, but they knew that I was struggling as well. That I had struggled growing up, and that somehow I had managed to get through and survive all of that. And so they weren't telling me these things looking for counseling. They were looking for support and love and encouragement, and I was able to give them that. And then I ended up moving to another church years later. That again, I had similar experiences. It was in a different community, different demographics, but still able to speak into lives of parents and other people who had challenges in their marriages and parenting challenges and all kinds of different things before I ended up starting another church. I was sent to start a new church in the community, and I wanted this church to be for normal, everyday people who were facing challenges and brokenness. And God sent those people to our church where it seemed like everybody had a life like me, where we all had things going on that we had to work through. And I realized that the challenges that I had in life, God was using to make me a stronger person. God was using to make me, to grow my perseverance, to grow my character, to grow my strength. And then he was using me to help encourage other people and help other people build those things in their lives and help other people see that God has a plan for their life. God used my brokenness. God used my challenges to help address the challenges of other people. When I tell you that I know what it feels like to hurt, I mean it. When I tell you I know what depression feels like, I mean it. Not too many years ago, I tell my church this, I've told my family this, that I just didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to exist anymore. So I have a shotgun at the house, and I picked it up, and I put it in my mouth, and I was going to make sure that my arm was long enough to fit the trigger. And I planned out how I was going to not be here anymore. I wanted to make sure that my wife and daughter didn't find me in a way that was going to traumatize them, and had it all planned out and thought out. But God reminded me that me not being here was going to cause more trauma to the people around me. And so I figured that I would just suck it up and deal with the hurt for a little while. And God worked in my life and helped me get through that. I told my church this morning that I'm in a season of life now where things are challenging. There is a person or people who I really think that are, I don't know if they're intentionally doing it, they're just being led spiritually. They're causing a great deal of stress and anxiety and issues in my life where they're causing some challenges. They're raising some really dangerous perceptions that could ruin my life and my family and my career. They're doing some things that are making my life quite the challenge right now. If you're hurting, if you're struggling, if you're challenged, I know what it feels like. And this is my message to you. There's a purpose to pain. I'm actually going to make another video at some point in time. But I want you to know that God hasn't forgotten you just because you're hurting. God isn't ignoring you. God isn't looking down and saying, I care about this person. I'm going to give them a bunch of money and a great family. I don't care about that person, so I'm just going to let whatever happens to them. I'm going to back off. That's not what God does. Romans 8, there's a verse in there in the Bible that says that all things work together for the good of those who love God and have been called according to his purposes. And so I'm able to see that God has worked even my challenges and struggles out in a way that has been good for me and good for the people around me. Not that it made it less painful, not that it made it hurt less, but it's been good. I'm reminded of a story in the Bible in the book of Genesis. There's this guy named Joseph who had a big family, 11 older brothers, but his dad really liked him. He was his dad's favorite for whatever reason. He was the youngest, and his dad really just adored him so much that his older brothers got really jealous of him. So jealous, they decided that they were going to get rid of their brother. They were going to kill him. They had a slight change of conscience, and they decided instead that they were just going to sell him into slavery. And so, without their dad's knowledge, they sold him into slavery and then went back and told their dad that he had accidentally been killed. So his dad, of course, was heartbroken, but Joseph went to a place where he was sold into slavery. He had to work, but he ended up being blessed in that. And so everything that he did turned out to be really, really blessed. Again, things were growing. He was ended up a slave to the Pharaoh at the time, and so he was in a position where he had influence and power because the Pharaoh saw that everything he did turned to gold. Things were really, really good. And then Pharaoh's wife noticed Joseph as well and started flirting with him, coming on to him. But Joseph wanted nothing to do with his boss's wife. And so she got upset and framed him and accused him of trying to get with her. And so he was thrown into prison. And God again there blessed him and worked some things out where he built some relationships with other prisoners. As they were released, they told Joseph, hey, we're going to tell the Pharaoh about you. We're going to get you out of here. But they ended up forgetting, and he had to sit in prison for years. This innocent guy who loved God was hated by his siblings, sold into slavery, ended up working his way up, but then put in prison, then forgotten in jail. And finally, years later, some things worked out. You can go read it in the book of Genesis, where he was finally let out of prison, put in charge of a certain department of the government where he oversaw food storage. And it just so happens that his dad and his brothers were going through a drought in another country. And so they went to Egypt to the Pharaoh to beg for food from their food storage. Joseph happened to be in charge of that, saw his family coming. They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And over time, it worked out so where he was able to have a restored relationship with his dad, with his brothers. Things got better, and he ended up saving their lives from starvation because of that. God worked even the ugliness, the hurt, the pain that he was going through for their good. And so, young people in particular, things hurt. Things are a challenge at times. You may be going through some things that you just want to numb the pain. You want to take the hurt away. You want to take those challenges away. You wish you could just have a life like people around you. God sees you. He hasn't forgotten you. And maybe he wants to use you to help those around you. If you can make it through, if he can pull you through that and make you stronger because of it, then maybe he wants to use you to help rescue other people. Why am I telling you all this? Because it's not going to take any of the pain away. It's not going to take the hurt away. But if you change your perspective and say, God, who are you trying to make me be because of this? Who do you want me to be? How are you growing me? How are you challenging me? And then say, who can I be an encouragement to around me? That's what I'm doing. If you're struggling or challenging or having challenges, I want you to know that I'm here for you. Like, I'm really here for you. Not just to pat you on the back and say, there, I'm sorry. But if you need something, if you need some advice, if you just need somebody to listen to, I'm really good at listening. Not as good as talking and carry on conversations, but really good at listening. If you just need somebody to talk to, somebody to help you see things maybe from a different angle, let me know. So whether you're a previous church student of mine, whether I know you from the organization that I've started, whether I know you from other areas in life, I love you guys, and I'm here for you. Hang on. If you seek God, the Bible says if you seek him with all of your heart, you will find him. He will find you. He is waiting at the door and knocking, waiting for you to pursue him back. He's already made a way. And if you don't know what that looks like, I'd love to talk with you about that as well. Anyway, you guys have a great rest of the day. Stay strong. Keep looking at how God wants to make you bigger and better and stronger and more powerful. And look around you to see who's out there that you can help, that you can encourage along the way. See you guys.